Good morning. I have nothing scripted. This is not planned. But I just felt like talking to someone, and there's no one. So it's just like super early in the morning. And I'm just sitting in that quiet space between Christmas and New Year's. And things are supposed to be slower and calmer and lighter, but that's not necessarily the case in my world right now. I feel okay in it, though. This is probably the first... no, my mornings are always quiet, but it's the first time I've been alone in my house for a little bit. So I don't know, I guess I'm reflecting on 2025, and my year started with my grandmother dying. It started with grief and sadness, but also not. I mean, she was 95. I don't know how old she was, but 96. She had lived her life, so it wasn't... But with her passing, there was a look at her life, a look at the life she gave her children, and that generational stuff. So that started building. Not that it wasn't already there, but that started building for me at the beginning of the year. And then I was, my plan last year from January to May was to work on that whole the podcast and get it ready. And then life gave me the opportunity of jury duty in the middle of that for 2.5 weeks. So then as soon as that was over, I had like a month and a half to really get ready for the podcast. And then the podcast, and so this is a really fast year, and it was a really probably one of the biggest years of my life. My year consisted of a lot of hard conversations, a lot of meaningful and life-changing conversations, but you've heard a lot of them, but in preparation for almost every episode, there were deep, honest conversations with either people I was recording with or my therapist and my other therapist, my sister, and, some other connections that I've had throughout the years. Like, there's so much healing that happens in those conversations, and just getting things out that are fucking up here. So the fall hit, and I typically struggle in the fall. That's when life goes from, like, I think summers with teenagers are pretty calm. For the most part, I don't see them. I have really good kids, so they have a lot of freedom. They have a lot of independence. So I go from that to games every night of the week, practice, having a cooked dinner again every night of the week. So just like, I love it, but chaos. And every fall somewhere in there, I struggle. I did really well up until, I think, Micah's last game. Once that game ended, there was just like this rush of emotions. And in that time frame, being very aware of like, I'm very good at naming it to tame it. So when I feel stuff, okay, Micah comes home from her last game and she's sobbing and I hug her and we like, why is there so much sadness in that for me? And then I dissect that and I talk to my counselor and so I started the process of another round of EMDR, and I don't want to say that derailed me, but that fucked me up for a couple weeks. There's just, when you go in with a presenting problem and then you uncover or examine how you came to have that presenting problem, like there's a lot of grief and sadness in that. And you don't always work through it in 1 week. So for me, it carried over through about 6 weeks. And I wasn't pretty during it. I had so much fear and anxiety come up. I had a lot of anger and resentment come up. Yeah, there was a lot of shame that came up. But I am for sure on the other side of it. Every time I go through this process, the confidence that returns in me is something I'm very grateful for. That it's not like it just hasn't always lived there naturally for a long time, or I suppressed it for reasons I've worked through in EMDR. But I always feel grateful for the experience. no matter how hard it is. I'm not through this experience at all. I still have probably several more weeks. Well, no, I don't know. Maybe not several, but I know that I have a few more weeks to get through this presenting problem, but I know I'm at the point where we can start working on positive cognition. I think I'm saying this right. The other piece that I want to talk about that has been life-saving, life-changing, I don't know how to describe this. And that's meditation. I know that I've talked about this before, but back in 2020, when I was going through some shit, and I mean, it was the pandemic, and I mean, we were all kind of losing our minds a little bit. I was in the process of finally finding mine. And one of the things that I did during the pandemic, so April of 2020 was the first time I lived alone with my children. So I was learning how, when they weren't with me, how to be alone in a house. In my entire life, like up until 18, I lived with my parents and siblings. From 18 to 40, I either lived with my sister and her kids, or I lived with whoever I was relationshiping with. Classic U-Haul lesbian over here. So 2020, I was living alone for the first time. And I had already started meditating. I started meditating 2018, maybe 2019. In 2009, I was already meditating with my volleyball team at that time. But my meditation practice at home was basically just listening to YouTube as I fell asleep. Or sometimes after work, I would put in a guided meditation and do that before I would parent. So in May of 2020, I see this post on Facebook for this 21-day meditation challenge being offered by Yoga Kayla at the Grounded Ungun studio. And so I swallowed my fear of lesbians and I signed up for it. And starting, I think it was June 1st, she emailed over a meditation to listen to every day. And they were, mostly morning ones or whatever, 10 minutes long, nothing like major. It was just quick little introduction to sort of just like an everyday practice. So I did that challenge, and I don't know that I noticed immediate relief from it, but that challenge taught me to continue meditating. I probably didn't do it every day, but I just did it more consistently and more during the day or morning time versus falling asleep. And then in September of 2020, I sort of redid the challenge, but by myself. I started like this bedtime routine, but I wouldn't lay down and try to fall asleep with it. I would sit in my little meditation spot, set a timer for 20 minutes. It was so hard to get to those 20 minutes at first. I would keep peeking, but I would make myself sit there for 20 minutes. And then eventually the timer would go off and I would just hit snooze. And then sometimes I would sit there until, or not snooze, I would hit repeat. So another 20 minutes. So there were times where I was sitting there for 40 minutes. And definitely by Thanksgiving of 2020, that was the first time I ever posted that thriving, surviving in crisis thing. It was the first time I ever realized I was in the green. And at the end of that year, and I had been talking to my counselor, all year about why I was doing so well, why I was thriving in a pandemic. One of the reasons is living alone. Living alone is amazing. I have so much control over my space, my peace, and there isn't someone else's anxious energy. Like if someone comes home from a bad mood and you know what I mean? So I just love living alone. I've learned that since the pandemic. And the other huge piece is meditating. And there are so many benefits that are scientifically proven of why meditation works. But for me, I was just trying to think of, what, and I've been chatting a lot about it recently, because of something I'm going to tell you about in a second. But meditation is not about clearing the mind. This motherfucker is never clear. She's constantly running. What meditation does, it gives me the opportunity to pay attention to what the fuck she's talking about. A lot of times she's just running and I'm not really I'm just everywhere. I'm replaying scenes and having conversations with people, replaying old conversations and all this stuff. And so when I sit in meditation, I connect to my anchor, which is my breath. And once I realize that I am no longer paying attention to my breath and I'm thinking about conversation with my mother or this, that, or the other, whatever. So I recognize, okay, you're thinking. Sometimes I just say you're thinking and then go back to the breath. But when I started, I would picture that thought, that conversation on a cloud, and I'd watch it float away. And then I go back to my breath, and then you just keep doing that. You just keep paying attention, and it sort of gives you clarity. It gives you calmness, peace. And it doesn't come from the first time you sit down on the mat and try to do it. It comes from consistency. And it does so much for rewiring your brain and I don't know. There's a lot of shit out there about why it's good for you. So I did a lot of that in 2020. I did it again at the start of the podcast year. In May, I started reaching out to people that I wanted to have on the show later on, and I reached out to Yoga Kayla about doing an episode with me on meditation, and so in June I restarted, because I still have all the meditations on my phone. So I redid that 21-day challenge in June, and I mean, not as consistently as I did 5 years ago, but again, going into the summer, like, I honestly think just being consistent again and sticking with the meditation, it was great for me. I sort of fell off in fall. That's probably part of the reason why I always lose my shit in the fall, is I fall off of my routines. Meditating is usually one of those, sort of just like going to the gym for me. So my stomach's growling so bad. So the last few weeks, Yoga Kayla and I have been working on a project together to bring these meditations that I've had saved in my phone for 5 years to you. She's agreed to put it all online for free on YouTube. And I have had the opportunity to like edit these meditations and put them to video and all of that. So starting January 1st, she's going to put out that 21-day challenge that I did 5 years ago. So it's going to be free on her YouTube channel. Meditate through it. And she's also going to have a website that I am helping her work on, where she's going to offer a membership. One of the very first things I said to her, I think like as soon as we exchanged phone numbers, was, have you ever thought about having your own app? Because so many times over the last 5 years, I have turned to those meditations, just randomly pick a day. And for me, even though I didn't know her, there was something familiar about her. I've always wanted my counselor to record a meditation for me. But I just sort of felt like, you know, Kayla was this next best, like someone that I sort of knew that was close to me that could calm me down when I was in, you know, crisis or panic situation. So I've always thought if she had her own app, I would absolutely, you know, have that and just have access to a library full of meditation. And so now we're working on that together. So yeah, she's also going to have a website, where you can get a membership for $6.99 and have access to a whole library full of meditations. There will be morning meditations and bedtime meditations and meditations for panic. I'm making her do one that's quick, so if you're starting to have a panic attack or whatever, like, you know, it'll grab you quick and ground you back into real life. She already has some other ones for stress and anxiety and joy and gratitude, and just a whole library full. So that is what I have been doing the last 2-3 weeks, is re-listening to that whole 21 days and very heavily meditated lately, which, you know, I guess I have needed. My mother is in the hospital and about to go into surgery in a couple of hours. So yeah, that has been my year, 2025. Yeah. So I think that's it. Go subscribe to Meditate Through It on YouTube and follow her on Instagram, and then there'll be updates for, when that website is launched and when that library is ready to go. And then you can subscribe and have access to all of her meditations. So, okay. Yeah, and I am looking for guests for season 2. It's almost the new year, so if you're on my list, you're getting a phone call or a Facebook message coming up soon. If you want to be on my list, reach out. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye.